Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Game with Hal. Today I'm thrilled to welcome a special guest by the name of Jake Butt. Jake Butt is known for his exciting playing career at the University of Michigan and then his little stint in the NFL. Jake brings an exciting passion to the game as well as a passion now in the broadcasting booth. Today's episode with Jake Butt is one you won't want to miss about an exciting NFL and football career.
So, starting off, obviously coming to play football, you got to get recruited by colleges in order to get to where you got to be. What was your recruiting process like to get recruited by Coach Hoke at Michigan?
Yeah, so hey, good stuff there, Coach Hoke. We go back a while now. Really, so the recruiting process is different for everybody and was unique for me. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. Actually, I grew up in Pickerington, so I was a suburb of Ohio State. My basement didn't look like what do we got here? This. My basement did not look like this. Actually, my basement was decked out in Ohio State gear. So I grew up a Buckeye fan in the heart of Buckeye country. And I guess my first offers, you never forget your first offer. My first offer, I was a sophomore at Pickerington High School North. I got called up to varsity my freshman year to be a kicker and a punter, believe it or not. So my background, I was a soccer player. I was a kicker and punter. And then started making plays. They put me in at receiver on JV. I played both ways. They put me at edge. So I was going up against Patrick Elfline, who was a multi-year All-American and team captain for Ohio State. And that slowly got me to playing varsity for my high school, which as a sophomore starting varsity for a successful program, the offers started to roll in. My first one was Buffalo out of New York, the MAC school. And it rolled and it rolled and it rolled. Right, I believe it was my transition between sophomore and junior years when I got offered by Michigan, and that was the biggest offer I had, and it stood out. And immediately, obviously, growing up in Columbus around that rivalry, I was like, "Holy cow! I think I want to be a part of that program." Hoke, what made Hoke special? I know we're coming off Jim Harbaugh, and he's unique in his own way. Hoke was a great recruiter, and the entire staff were full of great recruiters. Greg Madison and his wife, just salt of the earth people. She would bake cookies and, made you feel like family. My tight end coach was Dan Ferrigno. Also, I think he just retired. Just salt of the earth human being. He came to my wedding last year. And they put a heavy emphasis on recruiting. And if you looked at our recruiting classes, loaded. We were loaded. So what always stood out to me about that staff is their personalities, their hearts. They were human beings first before football coaches. And that was a big reason why I said, hey, I'm going to spend a lot of time wherever I go in college. I trust these guys because they were just good human beings first.
Right. And then growing up in Ohio, being an Ohio State fan your whole life, what was that transition like to play in the big house, a place that you didn't like when you were growing up?
Yeah, well, you almost got to go back to recruiting still. So I committed. Well, before I committed to Michigan, it would have been 2011. Yeah, 2011. I started taking recruiting visits, and I went to Tennessee. I went to Northwest. I went to a bunch of different places. But I took 3 visits to Michigan. First one was 2011, Michigan, Notre Dame, under the lights. Denard Robinson to Roy Roundtree in the corner of the end zone. Everybody remembers it. First night game in the history of the Big House. My grandfather played at Notre Dame. So half of the reason I went there was to go watch Notre Dame because my grandfather played for Frank Leahy. I knew it was a historic rivalry. So I went there. It was a record crowd, like 115,000. I'm walking on the field like, whoa. I mean, of all the visits I went to, Big House, first ever night game, Notre Dame, Michigan, a ranked matchup, a rivalry. And then you get the game that we got, which was a back and forth competitive game. I was like, wow, this is a place I definitely want to be a part of. That was the first seed. Michigan, Notre Dame. So middle of the season, Michigan won on a last second field goal. I think it was like 12-10. Not the most exciting game, but still a competitive game, a rivalry. That was the second seed. And then finally, It was Michigan, Ohio State. Brady Hoke beat Ohio State, and that team beat Ohio State. Luke Fickell was the interim head coach. And what I remember is I grew up an Ohio State fan. I'm from Columbus. I'm taking a visit in Ann Arbor to watch that game. And I'm sitting with all the recruits. There was a bunch of recruits when Michigan won that were like huffing and puffing. They were upset that Ohio State lost. So there was guys that were just taking a free visit to Michigan, but were Ohio State fans. And that pissed me off. And that was the first thought where, oh, I'm getting mad to defend Michigan. That's the indicator. I love Michigan. I want to go play football there. So before I ever stepped into the big house, that's actually the answer to your question. I fell in love with Michigan in that moment, and I knew that was the school I wanted to play for.
Right, and you said on your first visit there was a record-setting crowd in the Big House at 115,000 people that night. And the Big House is one of the toughest environments to play in college football. What is it like going from playing under the lights just in front of Pickerington, Ohio, and then playing in front of 100,000 plus people in in Michigan?
You can't even compare it. It's the biggest stadium in North America, I believe. You can't compare it. And really, it starts with the tunnel. When you leave the locker room and you're walking down the tunnel, once you exit the locker room, there's this long tunnel, and it's probably 75 yards. I don't know the exact distance, but it's far enough away where once you come out of the locker room and turn left, you just see like white. It's probably looks like what happens when you die, which is darkness and then this little white light, and you just know to walk towards that light. And as you walk, the band gets a little bit louder, the buzz of the crowd gets a little bit louder, and the light gets brighter and bigger. And as you walk out there, there's the fans, and they're cheering for you and rooting you on, and the band erupts. Suddenly you can hear it clearly. There's an intro video, and then you run out and touch the banner. You're not getting adrenaline like that in high school, even at Pickerington North. And really, even in the NFL, like Michigan was such a special place. I put it in a league of its own. You can't hear. That's an interesting thing. When you're in your stance, even at home, you can't always hear the snap count. And making a play in front of the fans, like my first catch, the crowd, the pop of the crowd. My first touchdown, the pop of the crowd. Those are things that they rattle your bones, they rattle your skeleton because it's so exciting. Just a special place.
Right, and then at your time at Michigan, there was a coaching change from Coach Hoke to Coach Harbaugh. What was it like adjusting to a new staff?
Yeah, it's each coach has their own personality. Each coach has their own support staff, like coordinators and position coaches. Each coach has their own philosophy on what they want their team to be, what they want the culture to be, what plays they want to call. Again, Brady is more of a, what we would always say is like, hey, you'd go grab a bite to eat with Brady and go out to dinner. Whereas, Jim, when he first got there, much more intense. I would say nowadays, Jim has, softened up a little bit. He might not like that word choice, but has kind of become more friendly and approachable. But when Coach Harbaugh first got there, he was intense. He was fierce. And in a sense, probably had a wall built up around him. Brady, nice, approachable. I told you that from recruiting. Jim, much more intense. But ultimately, got love for both of them, and I think both of them played a key part. Brady took over Michigan in a really Michigan was in a dark place. To go from Lloyd Carr and then to go to those darker years under Rich Rod, Michigan lost its identity. You think about Michigan and Ohio State, they were neck and neck. These were two elite programs that, battled. And Ohio State, through their coaching transitions, they haven't had a down year. Luke Fickell in 2011 was the only down year. They haven't had a down year. Michigan, that was shocking to have the down years they did under Rich Rod. So Brady did I give him a ton of credit of kind of stabilizing and setting the program. Jim took it ultimately to the next heights.
Right. And then once you got to the NFL too, you also had to deal with the coaching change. How do you feel like prior experiences and making sure you learned and kept a mental note helped you when the stage got bigger and you needed to adjust when there was more pressure under you?
You know, it is a rhythm and it's a battle rhythm, and you get used to it. In Michigan, I had four different coordinators in 4 years. It was, Coach Borges, Al Borges, then it was Doug Nussmeier, and then it was Jed Fish and Tim Drevno. So, that's really what it is, that affects my life more than anything, is learning the new playbooks, learning the new route concepts and blocking schemes. The same thing happened in the NFL. We had one coordinator my rookie year, another coordinator my second year, another coordinator my third and fourth year. So it was the coaching turnover and the, need to learn new playbooks that I just kind of, at a certain point, I feel like I learned all the possibilities of plays you could call. It was just learning the new names. So in a sense, yeah, college did prepare me for that, especially playing at Michigan in a pro system. There was a ton of carryover from our playbook in Michigan to our playbook in Denver.
Right. And then obviously being an All-American, winning John Mackey Award for one of the best tight ends in the nation at Michigan. What was it like for you to be under the spotlight in a pro style offense with Michigan? And how do you think that prepared you for the challenges that you had to face once you got to the league?
I really think, to answer that, I have to go back to when I was being recruited once again, which is why I was attracted to Michigan, was the history. I love the history of excellence. And I love the standard of, there was no compromise. You're expected to be a great athlete, a great leader, a great student. And as a recruit, when you walk into Schembechler Hall, there's the football museum. And I just remember seeing all these great players from the past, winningest program in college football, the Heismans that people have won, the All-American wall, going back to even the 1800s. And I had a thought. I was like, man, I want to be a part of that. I want to be up there one day. And I'm sure every recruit thinks that, but I was determined to make it happen. It started, I was an early enrollee. So I left halfway through my senior year of high school to put on weight. I came in at 209 pounds. By spring ball, I was 235 pounds. By September, week 1, I got all the way up to 245 pounds. And by week 3, I was our starting tight end. So if you can start as a true freshman at a school like Michigan, you got a chance. I won the starting role. I tore my ACL my sophomore year, but I overcame that. Junior year, when Jim Harbaugh came in, I knew as a tight end I was going to have opportunities, because that's what Jim does. And I made sure I was ready for those opportunities. By the end of spring ball that year, I think I had established myself as one of our best offensive weapons, and I knew I had a chance at being an All-American and winning the Mackey. And ultimately, junior year and senior year, it just came down to me executing on the opportunities, which, I did a good job of.
Right. And then after your junior year, you got an all-time high. You could have gone to the NFL. What was that decision to come back and take another year under Coach Harbaugh?
Yeah, it was a thought out decision. And I'd say I talked to a bunch of people. There was a few key reasons why. First one is that, growing up in Columbus, we hadn't beaten Ohio State in my time there. And I looked at the team we were going to have in 2016, and we were loaded from a talent standpoint. So I really believe
2016 came down to an inch.
It came down to an inch. Yep. It came in football's a game of inches. And I knew that was going to be the case. I knew we were going to have an opportunity to beat Ohio State. I thought, if I come back in 2016, we will beat Ohio State. We're going to win the Big Ten championship, and we're going to compete for a national title. Like, that's how talented our roster was. And really, we were that certainly was on the table. We just obviously fell short, and Wilton, our quarterback, getting injured, messed us up. That was the number. Those were the main reasons. Beat Ohio State, win a Big Ten title, and win a national title. It's the same. I wanted the feeling that those guys had when they won the national title 2 years ago, and won the Rose Bowl and won the bit. That's what I believed we were going to do in 2016. I also wanted to be captain. I felt I had a chance at being voted captain. I didn't win the Mackey in 2015. I felt like I could win the Mackey in 2016. And one thing that stood out, I had just been named All-American for the 2015 season. Okay. So Coach Harbaugh, at the end of every practice, we huddle up, and, sometimes guys give a little speech. He calls them wise words. He asks people to come speak to the team. And then he makes announcements for the betterment of the team. Like Jabril Peppers, hey, he's going to go to New York. He's one of the Heisman finalists. And we all clap and cheer. And, so-and-so is an All-American, or so-and-so academic, whatever it was. So I found out I was All-American practice. And then the very next day, we're running routes versus air, and Jim is sitting on the 50-yard line. I run a post route, and I catch it, and I run right past him. And right as I'm running past him, he says, Jake, you know what's better than being a one-time All-American? I said, what's that? He said, a two-time All-American, right? And I was like, yeah, you're exactly right. I told you about the All-American wall. They have your names right inside Schembechler Hall. They divide it by one-time, two-time, three-time. One-time All-Americans, it's a short list, not everybody, but it's still there's a lot of names in there. I don't know the exact number. There's a lot of names. Two-time All-Americans, though, you're talking, there was less than 20 names going into my senior year. So you're talking about less than 20 people in the history of Michigan football ever were a two-time All-American. And I believe there's only 2 or 3 three-time All-Americans. But I wanted to be one of 20 in the history of Michigan. That sounded really cool. And lastly, I had a chance at breaking the career records for Michigan too. So I talk about how much I loved history. I knew I was approaching the career receiving records by a tight end, which I ultimately did break my senior year.
Always needed, like a drum, baby, don't stop beating. Like a drum, baby.